Chapter 20 of The Professor. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Martin Geeson. The Professor by Charlotte Bronte. Chapter 20. A competency was what I wanted. A competency it was now my aim and resolve to secure. But never had I been farther from the mark. With August, the school year, l'année scolaire, closed, the examinations concluded, the prizes were adjudged, the schools dispersed, the gates of all colleges, the doors of all pensionnats shut, not to be reopened till the beginning or middle of October. The last day of August was at hand, and what was my position? Had I advanced a step since the commencement of the past quarter? On the contrary, I had receded one. By renouncing my engagement as English master in Mademoiselle Reuter's establishment, I had voluntarily cut off £20 from my yearly income. I had diminished my £60 per annum to £40, and even that sum I now held by a very precarious tenure. It is some time since I made any reference to Monsieur Pelet. The moonlight walk is, I think, the last incident recorded in this narrative where that gentleman cuts any conspicuous figure. The fact is, since that event, a change had come over the spirit of our intercourse. He, indeed, ignorant that the still hour, a cloudless moon, and an open lattice, had revealed to me the secret of his selfish love and false friendship, would have continued smooth and complacent as ever, but I grew spiny as a porcupine, and inflexible as a blackthorn cudgel. I never had a smile for his raillery, never a moment for his society. His invitations to take coffee with him in his parlour were invariably rejected, and very stiffly and sternly rejected too. His jesting allusions to the directress, which he still continued, were heard with a grim calm, very different from the petulant pleasure they were formerly wont to excite. For a long time, Pelet bore with my frigid demeanour very patiently. He even increased his attentions, but finding that even a cringing politeness failed to thaw or move me, he at last altered too. In his turn he cooled, his invitations ceased, his countenance became suspicious and overcast, and I read in the perplexed yet brooding aspect of his brow a constant examination and comparison of premises, and an anxious endeavour to draw thence some explanatory inference. Ere long, I fancy, he succeeded, for he was not without penetration. Perhaps, too, Mademoiselle Zoraide might have aided him in the solution of the enigma. At any rate, I soon found that the uncertainty of doubt had vanished from his manner. Renouncing all pretence of friendship and cordiality, he adopted a reserved, formal, but still scrupulously polite deportment. This was the point to which I had wished to bring him, and I was now again comparatively at my ease. I did not, it is true, like my position in his house, but being freed from the annoyance of false professions and double dealing, I could endure it, especially as no heroic sentiment of hatred or jealousy of the director distracted my philosophical soul. He had not, I found, wounded me in a very tender point, the wound was so soon and so radically healed, leaving only a sense of contempt for the treacherous fashion in which it had been inflicted, and a lasting mistrust of the hand which I had detected attempting to stab in the dark. This state of things continued till about the middle of July, and then there was a little change. Pelet came home one night, an hour after his usual time, in a state of unequivocal intoxication, a thing anomalous with him; for if he had some of the worst faults of his countrymen, he had also one at least of their virtues, i.e. sobriety. So drunk, however, was he upon this occasion, that after having roused the whole establishment, except the pupils, whose dormitory being over the classes in a building apart from the dwelling house, was consequently out of the reach of disturbance, by violently ringing the hall bell, and ordering lunch to be brought in immediately, for he imagined it was noon, whereas the city bells had just tolled midnight, after having furiously rated the servants for their want of punctuality, and gone near to chastise his poor old mother, who advised him to go to bed, he began raving dreadfully about le maudit anglais, Kremswort. I had not yet retired. Some German books I had got hold of had kept me up late. I heard the uproar below, and could distinguish the director's voice, exalted in a manner as appalling as it was unusual. Opening my door a little, I became aware of a demand on his part for Kremswort to be brought down to him, that he might cut his throat on the hall table, and wash his honour, which he affirmed to be in a dirty condition, in infernal British blood. He is either mad or drunk, thought I, and in either case the old woman and the servants will be the better of a man's assistance. So I descended straight to the hall. I found him staggering about, his eyes in a fine frenzy rolling. A pretty sight he was, a just medium between the fool and the lunatic. "Come, Monsieur Pelet," said I, "you had better go to bed," and I took hold of his arm. His excitement, of course, increased greatly at sight and touch of the individual for whose blood he had been making application. He struggled and struck with fury, but a drunken man is no match for a sober one, and even in his normal state, Pelet's worn-out frame could not have stood against my sound one. I got him upstairs, and in process of time to bed. During the operation he did not fail to utter comminations, which, though broken, had a sense in them, while stigmatizing me as the treacherous spawn of a perfidious country, he, in the same breath, anathematized Zoraide Reuter. He termed her femme sotte et vicieuse, who in a fit of lewd caprice had thrown herself away on an unprincipled adventurer, directing the point of the last appellation by a furious blow obliquely aimed at me. I left him in the act of bounding elastically out of the bed into which I had tucked him, but as I took the precaution of turning the key in the door behind me, I retired to my own room, assured of his safe custody till the morning, and free to draw undisturbed conclusions from the scene I had just witnessed. Now it was precisely about this time that the directress, stung by my coldness, bewitched by my scorn, and excited by the preference she suspected me of cherishing for another, had fallen into a snare of her own laying, was herself caught in the meshes of the very passion with which she wished to entangle me. Conscious of the state of things in that quarter, I gathered from the condition in which I saw my employer that his lady love had betrayed the alienation of her affections, inclinations rather, I would say. Affection is a word at once too warm and too pure for the subject, had let him see that the cavity of her hollow heart, emptied of his image, was now occupied by that of his usher. It was not without some surprise that I found myself obliged to entertain this view of the case. Pelet, with his old established school, was so convenient, so profitable a match, Zoraide was so calculating, so interested a woman, I wondered mere personal preference could, in her mind, have prevailed for a moment over worldly advantage. Yet it was evident from what Pelet said, that not only had she repulsed him, but had even let slip expressions of partiality for me. One of his drunken exclamations was, "And the jade dotes on your youth, you raw blockhead, and talks of your noble deportment, as she calls your accursed English formality, and your pure morals, forsooth. Des mœurs de Caton, a-t-elle dit? Sotte!" Hers, I thought, must be a curious soul, where, in spite of a strong natural tendency to estimate unduly advantages of wealth and station, The sardonic disdain of a fortuneless subordinate had wrought a deeper impression than could be imprinted by the most flattering assiduities of a prosperous chef d'institution. I smiled inwardly; and, strange to say, though my amour propre was excited, not disagreeably, by the conquest, my better feelings remained untouched. Next day, when I saw the directress, and when she made an